Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a special episode of the X Button. I am your host, Alejandro, and just as I teased in the main episode, I was going to have another very special guest, just like I did with my buddies over at Season Gaming 2 weeks ago and Travis Northup last week. This week, I'm honored to have someone that I highly admire recently because not only is he such a unique voice when it comes to like games coverage, but he really pushes the wide spectrum of discussion, agreements, disagreements when it comes to gaming at a time of many armchair analysts when it comes to the consolidation of the industry. Sometimes you need the experts. And who I have here is someone who I would consider an expert, and that is Richard Hoeg from the HoegLaw YouTube channel. How are you doing, Hoeg?
I am doing A-okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been I've been wanting kind of like I told you like in the pre-show, and just to kind of tell the audience here, I've been like wanting to kind of get you in because it's like your story is just so interesting with everything that has happened with your rise, something that happened late last year that I kind of teased, and I don't know if you really want to talk about that.
I am open to anything.
Yeah, so it's like it's been like your rise into being able to give that unique perspective into the legalese of American law and many things, and even your perspective on interesting law stuff from even other countries, especially with something in gaming and the recent Microsoft Activision Blizzard King merger that just completed recently. I don't want to really talk too much about it because I feel like you're already you have more than had your say, but you've done how many videos on ABK recently?
I think the Microsoft playlist is 64 videos.
That's insane. That is absolutely insane. Like how much? And it could have been even more, right? If things had happened different, like late last year. So that's great. So if everyone wants to know, like, see basically a Bible of the ins and outs of that, and you already posted the end one, right? I think I saw it posted, like kind of like
I did a video
like
earlier this week that was kind of the conclusion deal closed video. So yeah, I don't think I'll return to that playlist, but you never know. Things can happen.
Yeah, we'll see. Especially if the FTC still wants to erroneously keep the fight going, right?
They're definitely going to keep the fight going. Whether or not that changes anything is kind of the question. But yeah, they're definitely going to keep on.
Yeah, I certainly learned a lot. Like seeing that entire process, the arguments being made, and how accurate most of the things you said turned out to be. Even when there was things that you're like, yeah, this could be like 60-40, and then the 40% would be like the thing that happened like when they sued late December. So it was always interesting. You were always in the ballpark. And that's why I was like, yeah, I'm only going to listen to Richard Hoeg whenever it comes to, because now, especially with Twitter, how it is now with the For You page and fanboy wars, like aflame now, like more than ever, and people thinking they know and all that. It's like too much noise, little substance or true substance. So yeah,
but it's funny because when the FTC sued and when the CMA moved to block, I got a number of comments saying that I led people astray. And one thing I always say on my channel is I can't make guarantees for people that are deciding things, whether that's a judge or a regulator or elsewise. And I don't guarantee in my job or when I talk on YouTube, but you can kind of understand where the strength and weakness of an argument is. And we saw it when the FTC had to go look for their preliminary injunction in that deal.
Yeah. And you always also push that Twitch/video is not legal advice kind of thing. And some people, I think people miss that. So, and you always said it, it's like, it can always go either way. Here's my opinion. So it's like, that's on those people. It's not on you. I saw those videos.
My quotes used on Twitter for evil or for wrongness from time to time. And it's like, I try to jump in when I think it'll make sense and it's useful. But yeah, the console wars have only gotten worse over the past few years.
Yeah. And just kind of like for context, I play on everything. Like it's only with my show called the X Button. Our logo for our show are the 3 controllers and the X button like illuminated in each of them, kind of like an all-encompassing show. We play on all of them. I mainly play on PlayStation more, and I built all my library on PS4, so I kind of continue there. But man, if my opinions on Sony have been really interesting, like many this generation, with some of their moves and anti-consumer practices and bravados and all that. And so people can't blame me for being like a partisan either. So it's like, it's fun having fun with all the systems, especially like just this Friday, we're getting 2 big games with Spider-Man 2 and Wonder. Are you playing both?
Oh yeah, I'm going to play both Mario and Spider-Man, definitely.
Yeah, I can imagine that because you only mentioned Hoeg House and your daughters, right? Yeah, so I can imagine they're excited.
Love a platformer, and so they're definitely going to be enjoying becoming elephants in wonder at some point tomorrow.
Yeah. Yes. Or even, well, I was going to say later today, but it would launch at your midnight. So I would assume they go to bed at that point. So yeah, Hoeg, I want to hear some of like the backgrounds on how you started virtual legality.
Sure. So I think some people know this from my channel, but I graduated from law school in 2005, and I immediately went into what we tend to call big law here, large law firms with a lot of attorneys practicing. And I was offered a couple of jobs, one of which was in mergers and acquisitions, and one of which was in antitrust law. Yeah. I mentioned those because those are the things I discuss the most now. And I took the mergers and acquisitions job. So I did venture capital and funding and entrepreneurship and small business transactions and mergers and acquisitions for the bulk of my career in large law firms, which ended in 2016 when I launched my own firm, HoegLaw, to focus on businesses and entrepreneurship. Because as I've said in a number of places, I love dreamers. I love people that are betting it all on themselves to go and make things happen for the rest of us in the world. And so to the extent that I could be a lawyer out there that was helping people make companies and make money and hopefully realize those dreams, that's what I wanted to focus my practice on. And so in 2016, I launched that. And then the immediate thing for when you start a service business like a law firm is how do we find clients? How do we tell people what we're doing? What kind of expertise we have? And so I wanted to market the firm differently than just, oh, we're a large law firm. I'm a large law firm lawyer. I'm just smaller and cheaper now. So come on over. And so instead, I marketed to a podcast called The Easy Allies. Yeah. That some of you may be familiar with.
Shout out to Huber. Shout out to Brad.
Yeah, out of California. Really nice guys. They were running a Patreon at the time, and they were really at the forefront of the kind of Patreon-supported, crowd-funded, personality-driven reviews and commentary process, along with Kind of Funny. And they had a Patreon, and one of their Patreon tiers was sponsor our podcast. And it was a reasonable price for what I was looking for as a marketing budget. And it was weird. It was different. I didn't expect there to be other law firms doing that. And so I sponsored them for a couple of years until they stopped doing Patreon sponsorships.
Like 2019, I think that's when they stopped, if I remember, because they also had the Ask Hoeg, right? Like they had even a section within their show that like what Hoeg thinks or something like that.
They did. So when I started sponsoring them, like you can go watch that episode. I think I even have it on like the firm's Facebook. But they say we're being sponsored by a lawyer, and they're all very incredulous about it. And it's funny because Kyle Bossman is a funny person. And they have that conversation, and then later on, Microsoft, so back to Microsoft, of course, starts buying companies at that time, and they have some questions over valuation and intellectual property rights and things like that. And Kyle winds up sending me an email saying, "Hey, I have these questions. Can you help us out with these?" And I answer them in what I consider to be pretty short form for a lawyer. I send bullet point email back with commentary. And then if you watch any of those Easy Ally episodes, they say, oh, Rick just responded in one day with 17 pages or what have you, because that's how I write about legal issues. And that eventually became a Help Us Out Hoeg segment because people liked it and had more questions. And so once I was doing that, I was also marketing here in Michigan on a University of Michigan sports radio program because I love my Michigan Wolverines.
Yes.
And so I was regularly appearing on the radio here in Michigan, and I was kind of getting a notion that I could do this. I could go and I could comment on things, and people were interested in it more than maybe even my family members thought they would be. And so that became something that I wanted to use as marketing for the firm. At the same time, I was kind of invested in YouTube. I'm a big Star Wars fan. And I was starting to watch commentary videos on The Last Jedi, which had come out in 2017. Yeah. And some of those people were getting a lot of good insights out to the world, but were doing it with like an iPad held up to a camera and like holding a pen and saying, this is what I'm talking about. And I'm like, I think even at my technological level, I can do a channel slightly better than that. Now, as it turns out, you can go look at my early videos. It wasn't a lot better than that. But as I went along, then I worked at it for that. This would have been 2018. So I've been working at it for 5 years or so. It became popular in spurts, as you do in YouTube. And then Epic versus Apple happened. And I was also covering Twitch getting rid of Dr. Disrespect. That was a very popular video
That series. Was the same year, right? Like both of those happened like 2020. I think it happened in 2020, right?
I think they were in the same year because then Epic versus Apple was my longest playlist for a while. Microsoft announces that they're going to purchase Activision at the top of 2022. And so I just wound up doing long playlists of really in-depthful things, ultimately because I wanted to market the firm and show potential clients that I knew what I was talking about and I was someone that they could trust. And then that became its own thing when essentially the YouTube revenue became bigger. In 2022, there was also the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard trial, which I wound up getting involved with because one of my friends was covering it on her channel.
Legal Bites, right?
Supportive of her. What?
Legal Bites, right?
Legal Bites Media, yes, Alita. And she wanted to cover it, and so we had been communicating behind the scenes in chat on Twitter, and I wanted to help her do that, and so I committed to helping be on those episodes, and then that wound up being something where I was on every show because I wanted to make sure that she wasn't left alone, and that wasn't a problem halfway through. But at that point, you're invested in the story of the trial. Yeah,
and just as a tangent there, that's where the term radicalized YouTuber started, right? The Amber Heard thing.
Yeah, so Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard wound up getting that particular cadre of YouTubers and commenters a lot of attention from the mainstream media, the Washington Post, various places, and that included my friend Alita, that included some of the other people that appeared on her channel with her, and that wound up becoming a kind of pitched battle between some of the media that thought that our commentary on a trial like that was essentially just grifting or money grubbing or what have you. And Alita was always very careful of presenting legal commentary that was informed by what we were looking at. I wouldn't have been on her channel otherwise. I think she's a great person and a really good voice to have in this space. So I will stand for that. Yeah. But she started getting attacked from various places on the Washington Post, and I wound up defending her. That's where Hangouts and Headlines really started, was the Depp v. Heard trial, as I wanted to talk about how the media treats these things. And then people had comments on me and how I was handling those questions, and that became a thing in and of itself. So yeah, I was called a radicalized influencer, and I was called something like a tabloid grifter. I don't even think
tabloid grifter is the one I saw. Like, just in the random comments, it was nuts. It was like, if they actually saw like who they were talking to, like actual people that have been barred and know their stuff, instead of thinking that you're all grifters. It was like, that was such an insane time in 2022.
Yep. No, and that was going into the fall, was having all those names called. And so I got a little bit more of a taste of the internet in 2022 than I had really expected. And while I am still an optimist by heart, and I still think the best of people and the goodness of humanity, certainly the internet can give you pause in those thoughts from time to time. And I found myself on the end of a few fights on the internet that nobody can ever win. Just adds to the hate in the world. And then all of this stuff led to, obviously, a medical issue at the end of last year, 2022. I had a stroke. And this year has been primarily rehabilitation and therapy and coming back slowly and trying not to have another one throughout this year. But Microsoft didn't have to pause for any of that. So they were going through the transaction that they were going through while I was in the hospital, and then while I was in inpatient rehab, and then outpatient rehab. And I tried to cover it as much as I could over the course of the year.
Yeah. And that's been like, it's just really, it's so weird just thinking about how you were like, that's how you knew how beloved you were. How often you see tweets, are you coming back? How are you doing? Like, we miss you. It's like, that's how you know that the work that you did was so like important around that time, because at that time we were all out, like we were thrown to the wolves, let's just say. We didn't know like what was actually happening, if it was like a big deal that that trial that happened in June, I think it was a preliminary injunction, right? If that's what that was called, if that was like gonna be like a big thing, right? You were not fully back around that time. And
no, I was listening to tweets for the most part, and I was trying to tweet about it to the extent I could.
Yeah, and it was like, it's like better for you to be healthy than anything else. But it's like, I think I would assume that felt really good, seeing like how much your work resonated, that everyone was looking for your input on that, like during this whole time.
It did, and you never really know, right? I think one of the things that I've talked to my therapists about, and the people that have helped me through this rehabilitation process, is that I kind of got a Tom Sawyer funeral a little bit. Like, you got this moment when I was in the hospital where literally my father was going to my office to pick up the packages that were coming in, and he had to take multiple trips because there were so many packages and so many care notes that were coming from all over the world. And it absolutely helped me while I was in the hospital and in my recovery. And honestly, it was really nice for my parents to see, from my perspective, that I was doing something out there in the world that people cared about. So, I mean, it was really, really nice. And I cannot thank people enough. I still got care packages here, and I got one this week with paper cranes and little stickers of Care Bears and things that related to the Depp v. Heard trial. And it's awesome. And no, it's impossible to think too badly about yourself or your own situation, even after a stroke, when so many people are just pouring love and prayers into your mailbox and into your life.
And then also an amazing support with your wife, Mrs. HoegLaw, who kept us all updated. Like, I'll never forget it, because that's how I heard about it on December 31st. I had just finished watching the Michigan game, because I know that was such a me listening to the vidcast. You've always been so giddy that they were having such an amazing season heading into play. I think that was like the championship game, or kind of like the end one.
Semifinal. Yes, it's very funny because I told this story in the stroke series, but I only remembered to ask about the Michigan game on about January 5th. And I said to my wife, I said, I think there was a Michigan game during this period that I missed. And she said something along the lines of, you didn't miss it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like, she wanted to at least keep the positivity of that entire season at least going during the...
Yes. No, her story is that she was like, oh no, don't ask about that. Don't ask about that.
Wasn't that the because I was following her updates, and also HoegLaw, I think he was also updating us that he said that you sounded like Batman, because that's when they took you out of like they put tubes on you or something like that.
I was on a ventilator. Yes.
Yeah.
My voice was hoarse, and I was also slurring a little bit. And so I think Rob was the first person I talked to outside of the hotel room. So
he told us
a weird year.
He told us that he quoted Ghostbusters, right? That's how he knew that your cognition was at least there. He said the cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria.
I did. I said that. I said that. No, he was very happy to hear me on the phone. It's been wonderful to get all this support from all these various people that you maybe didn't even meet in real life, that you've been working with in this space, which is an unusual one. And so many people reached out. It was so wonderful. Yeah,
and all the support being poured over at Last Stand Media, how they always kept us updated from you, and even then, like, taking the stand, like, we're not gonna talk about any of this legal stuff until Hoeg is back. That's what Colin did. That's what Mr. Matty Plays did. The people over at Bitcast also, like, always keeping us updated every week until that surprise appearance you did, like, after a month into the show.
It was
like
in February. Yeah, it's very funny. I went back to watch that clip or my appearance in that show recently, and I'm moving so slowly, and everybody was so kind and happy to see me and nice. But it's like I look at myself there, and it's like I'm not even really that close to back, but I really wanted to be a part of those conversations. And honestly, the Bitcast that they did while I was sitting there in inpatient rehabilitation, where Travis just starts making fun of me, is one of my favorite memories of that time, because it was so nice to hear from them. And Travis was brooking no prisoners. Yeah. Like, I always knew something was wrong with Rick's brain, I think was his joke.
And by the way, like, because I had Travis on last week, I asked him, hey, I'm gonna have Hoeg on, do you want me to tell anything funny to him? And he sent me a couple roads, if it's okay for me to read them.
Sure.
So, he told me, tell him he's mostly living proof that not all lawyers are well dressed. Then he was like, tell him he talks like someone with an advanced degree and looks like he belongs behind the wheel of a forklift. And then another one, he said, tell him he looks like he got into law in hopes of one day helping to pass a constitutional amendment to mandate Bud Light as an alternative to tap water. And the last one, tell him he looks like he got into law because he thought Alien v. Predator was a Supreme Court case.
He's got a lot of comments on my sweatshirt, certainly.
Yeah. Is your tradition, to me, is that your hat and your hat and the sweatshirt. Like, I think it was in the Legal Bites video that I saw that when Colin was in, when y'all talked about The Last of Us Part 2 with Alita. That was one of the first times I saw you without a hat. I was like, man, that's so weird. Because I always know you as the hat, as the hat and sweatshirt and sweatshirt guy, and then it was no hat. So, and then sometimes with the frame that they put when you're not in, with the frame, they got the one without the hat. So the hat is such a, like, you thing now, and I really love the HoegLaw one. So,
oh yeah, I love hats. And in all honesty, originally it was one of those things where I could only squeeze in making a video and running the firm at like some ungodly hour before anybody was calling me and asking me for work. And so I would be rolling out of bed and wanting to make sure that I had something on my head in the early days of those videos. And so that became a hat thing. And it's fine.
It's good to have trademark. It's good to have like a trademark look too.
That's right. Hat guy Hoeg.
Yeah. And then for a bit this year, Cane Hoeg also.
Right. I have a set of canes or staves, depending on who sent them.
Yeah, I think that's when we started doing that. You would be like the Gandalf of the Bitcast, something like that. I think that was one of the jokes around that time. So.
Well, we also on my channel do a Dungeons and Dragons show called Lawyers and Dragons, and a number of people who like that sent Dungeons and Dragons related things, including a really awesome like custom made magic staff with a D20 at the top. It's awesome.
That's so freaking cool. That's what always so cool. You're just thinking of it because you're like dealing very serious stuff with lawyers, but you're so into like nerd culture. It's like such a interesting like cross section with your likings and your interactions. That's what makes it so fascinating, because no one would know. Like imagine if everyone just knew you're just a lawyer, but you're more than that, and that's what's so unique and funny and fun of always listening to you and things like that, and everywhere that you show up. And I tell you, every time that I see that you're in a new show, I get excited. I'm like, yeah, they got Hoeg. Like, it was so funny that today they posted the public version of the Final Fantasy 16, kind of like the spoiler cast that you were part on, like all the way back in like July. I'm a patron for LSM, so I listened to it back then. I just found it funny. I was like, they posted it the date that I'm gonna talk Final Fantasy with Hoeg, and which, by the way, like because I listen a lot, that was a very satisfying. I wouldn't call it heel turn, but I did listen how you were feeling towards that game, like in the lead up, especially when you saw the gameplay at a state of play last year. And I think that's when I was like, yeah, this ain't it. This is not for me. And then when you played it, I was like, wow, that says a lot, because you definitely were not like excited about it, right? Other than just being Final Fantasy at the next number one.
I was excited about a lot of stuff this year coming out, and Final Fantasy 16 was not on that list, and it turned out to be one of my favorite games.
Yeah, it's still, to me, until at this moment, it's still my favorite game this year. I also got to review it over at Season Game. I did all the big games early on this year. Like I did Jedi, Zelda, and Final Fantasy all back to back for Season Gaming. And Final Fantasy was one that I was also kind of like skeptical, because it's like I enjoyed Final Fantasy, but I started very late in the series, so I didn't have much history with that. So like, for example, like my first one was 13. That was my first ever one, and I had heard of many entries before. In fact, I had a friend that very dumbly, he always told me Final Fantasy 7 is the first ever Final Fantasy. I'm like, there's a 7 in the title. No, there's not, otherwise that's the first one. I'm like, but there's a 7. This is when I was young. Like, think about it, like back in the 90s. But I was like, we were all dumb kids. So 13 was my first one, and you that's kind of like what I wanted to like transition over to, is like, you've been a fan since day one, right?
Yes, I played Final Fantasy 1 along with Dragon Quest 1 before it was Dragon Warrior here in the United States. And it's been one of my favorite series really since the Super Nintendo Final Fantasies. Final Fantasy 2 and 3 here, but 4 and 6 in the series were games that really kind of helped me understand that games could tell more interesting stories than you'd really seen a lot of before then.
Yeah, especially with that art style, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Those pixels were awesome, and I love the music. Nobuo Uematsu is just fantastic, and Final Fantasy VI has some of my favorite music ever in video games.
Yes, I can't wait to talk about that one.
They really changed my opinion of what stories could be in games, and that's been kind of my lodestone for everything that I enjoy in video gaming is storytelling and narrative, and really doing interesting things with the medium that way.
Yeah, I would, because I like history myself, and I like reading background, like putting myself, like transporting me back to the era. Like from like what I understand, like you could like even say that Final Fantasy 2 and 3 at the time, so 4 and 6, along with 7 and Metal Gear in the 1990s, felt like they feel like the turning points of what storytelling could be done in video games, right? Like especially what video games were known back in the 90s that were more gameplay focused, and some of the complexities those games dealt with, especially Final Fantasy 3, that I was shocked with some of the things that they were dealing with back in '94. So
Definitely would that be on the console side, right? I mean, when we're talking about Super Nintendos and PlayStations, those are a little bit different than PC. PC gaming at the time, I was still playing adventure games and puzzle solving games. So that's like the era of Myst and other kind of really popular adventure game styles like the LucasArts games. So there was some storytelling over there, and that's what I also tended to gravitate towards. Space Quest, King's Quest, that kind of thing. Yeah. But Final Fantasy III here had one of my favorite moments that I can still remember, which is the Opera House that I kept a save before and I didn't touch for like a decade. I just left that save before the Opera House so that I could watch the Celeste Opera House scene.
Yeah. By the way, do you get to see the remaster version of that scene?
I played through it, but a while back. So my recollection is that they changed the lyrics on what I remembered.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I my first experience with 6, kind of like what I want to talk about. I just first played through 6 through the Pixel remasters that first originally came on mobile and PC in 2021, but I played them on PlayStation since they came out this year. And yeah, I was like actually stricken by just how amazing, just thinking like how they did like this entire sequence with the opera, which first like with the introduction of the opera and how they like did the how they did the sprites, and then obviously Silly's moment that you have to like select the right lyrics and just the music in the background, and then you hear it's actually Silly's theme, and then the battle against Ultos, the octopus, and it's introduced kind of like an opera scene also, and the music is in the background and how it's all framed. I was like, have you ever seen the memes of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, Danny DeVito? That I get it now. That was my moment. I was like, wow, that was like, and that was my first time experiencing it. Like they're almost 30 years later, and I was still stricken by just how great that entire sequence was. Yeah,
Celeste is one of my favorite characters. Yeah, and that event and that game was one of the big game moments in my history. And then I was waiting for Final Fantasy VII before anybody knew that it would be this kind of capstone type game for the series. And I remember having a pre-order for Final Fantasy VII that I kept in my wallet for like 2 years. And the magazines that we would look at in school with the Final Fantasy VII kind of screenshots that before the game was done. So yeah, it's been a part of my life forever.
Yeah, it's like and it's always been like that franchise for me that I knew about it, that you always know what are the corner stores franchise that I knew people loved of, and I got to see like I saw a friend play 7 one time, at least the macro reactor first. Like I think there was a demo for it. That was the first time that I saw it. So which was interesting that Remake also did a demo for that, kind of like keeping it in kind of keeping the nostalgia going, that yeah, we did a demo of that before, let's do that again. Then I saw that same friend, he showed me 10 on the PS2. He was like at the end of that game where you're like in a big airship fighting like a big dragon at the end, where that friend tells me it's like the final boss and he couldn't beat. I was like, oh, interesting, this seems really hard. And 13 was at a time, because I live in El Salvador, but I just got kind of like in Latin America. So here in El Salvador, there's like a predilection that if you see many gamer friends, they either gravitate to a FIFA, now called EA Sports FC, or either a Need for Speed game, or at the time Medal of Honor or Call of Duty. It was rare seeing my friends like venture outside of that. And Final Fantasy 13 was that game that I was like, everyone want to get, and I didn't want it because I was like, I don't think I'm a Final Fantasy. I haven't done like turn-based since Pokemon, and then they got it, and then that's why I was like, man, they're getting it. They're all gonna be playing and talking about it. Well, I'm gonna buy it. I start making my own money now. Before my dad, when he used to buy me games, he needed to be interested in the game for me to get it. So that was the first time that I could finally get something that it was not gonna look interesting. I bought it, and I tell you, Rick, I hated it. I hated 13 so much, but it was because that was not my kind of game. I was like, how I compartmentalized it back then was like, this looks like it could be an action game. Why am I not tapping buttons? It feels like it looks so stylish. I feel like I should be doing combos instead of like this paradigm shifts and all that. And I feel like if I go back now, I would have a different mindset, because this year was when I played Final Fantasy 1, 4, and 6 after I beat 16. And that was me, because I was like, I feel like I owe it to the series to see it now that they've given it to me in an easy way to experience.
The pixel remasters are great.
Yes, it's like the quality of life, just being able to quick save everywhere, the times 4 XP, times 4 gil, and all that to speed up the grinding.
You can walk diagonally. That's the big difference for me.
That blows my mind that having to think that you have to be left up to try to like move in those places, and being able to turn off the random encounters, like to speed that up. I was like, I can't imagine like a better time to really experience the series. And I wanted to do it kind of like how America did it the first one, America 2 and America 3, how I like calling it. Would you recommend me doing 2, 3, and 5? Because I've heard mixed stuff about that one. So
5, I will definitely put my hat in the ring for. I have not played enough of 2 and 3, honestly, even though I have the Pixel remasters. They weren't released here in those years, and it's been a very busy time for video games.
Yeah. Oh, yes. That's why I needed to compartmentalize. It was like I played them in the summer after I was like, nothing big is coming other than Avium as we were waiting for Starfield. So that's when I played them. In fact, this year I beat Final Fantasy VI twice. That's how much I loved it. It lived rent-free in my mind. But yeah, I was like playing the original one. I played Stranger of Paradise last year. So I played it without like really knowing too much about the original one. And it's so funny how much like Stranger of Paradise is Final Fantasy 1. It has like some of the same characters, same place names. Obviously, it had all the other it had like references to almost every Final Fantasy depending on the level that you did. And obviously, yes, we can joke about chaos. It's funny to think that unless this is just in the remaster, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Chaos was a thing in 1987, right? He was the villain, the main final boss.
Yeah, no, Chaos is there, definitely.
Yeah, so it was like everyone, like when we also the legendary trailer from that Square Enix presentation and from 2021 that looked horrible. Let's be honest, like it eventually looked better than subsequent, but that first one was like just the dude screaming chaos, we're gonna kill chaos is here, it's the darkness, I can taste it, just edgelord 101. Just getting to see that in pixel art, I was like, this is interesting. I had not thought of Stranger of Paradise that way. And then when I immediately jumped to 4, because my podcast co-host is not here, he used to play 4 when he was young, he never beat it, so he was like pushing me. I almost went through the entire, but I was like, he's telling me a lot about 4, I want to see it. And seeing how dark of a story it starts as, like, especially when you don't really think about it because of the pixel the pixel presentation, but when you really see it, I was like, man, they were really doing some serious stuff. You're basically committing.
Was fantastic.
Yeah,
one of my favorite character arcs.
Yeah, his transformation, like halfway through the game from the Black Knight to the Paladin, and just the different characters, Paulo and Porum, those little kids, the constant, like, ever revolving sacrifice of your party, which I'd say pops out near the end. It was my only thing. I was like, man, it's like all these sacrifices. It was like we're hitting like the monk character, sacrificing him the tower. Obviously, the one that stuck, the old man that uses meteor, that completely that's how he dies. That Paladin and Porum turning into stone to save the party. It's like these were moments that even now experiencing it, I think it says a lot about the power of those games, that in their pixel form they still made an impression on me. Because one more thing is that because now we have like all the pretty graphics and all that those moments would not hit. And because I was talking with Ains about it, he's a big 2 and 3 fan. He was worried when I was telling him I was going to play that those moments wouldn't hit. And I was like, they actually did. And I feel it says a lot about how it's presented and the music. I think the music really tells the story of those games, especially on 3.
The music is fantastic. And yeah, I think good storytelling wins the day. And you can tell it with pixels. You've seen that with like Octopath Traveler and some of the stuff that they brought into modern times. You can still tell it with those pictures, but good storytelling is the forefront of, I think, emotional experiences with all mediums, not just video games. Yeah,
and which leads us to Final Fantasy 3-6, which is the one that I kind of wanted for us to focus a little bit more on. That I really feel that storytelling in that one is just masterclass. Like how it handles 10 plus different characters, like being a true ensemble where you feel the main character is Terra, the green haired character you start in that game, and how it like expertly weaves every single character like throughout that entire story, where you feel there's many main characters, and you feel like you learn most about all of them except some of the extra ones that you can find like in the World of Ruin part of things. That I like just in storytelling. I wonder if you notice this, Paul. Hoeg. Isn't the World of Ruin part of that game? Do you feel like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild kind of aped that? Like a little bit? Like at least kind of like that scenario of like a world that could.
I think certainly Final Fantasy and some other series have tried to ape that feeling. I don't know that video gaming has ever kind of captured that the world is now devastated and the party is scattered and it's all sad and you have to try to come back together. World of Ruin change in Final Fantasy VI, but you see them chase it. Certainly in the Final Fantasy series, you see them chase it in 15. They chase it a little bit in
16.
And I think that's something
7 slightly with the meteor. After what happened,
7 has a similar kind of concept of here's an end of the world scenario and now the weapons are out and things like that, but it never feels that kind of tragic darkness loss feeling that I think you get a little bit in the end acts of 16 and the end of 15. But I haven't equated it with the Breath of the Wild series before. Breath of the Wild tends to read a little bit closer to me to something like Ys. I don't know if you know the Ys series.
Yeah, the Ys series. Yeah.
And that has floating castles and magic darkness towers and things like that. And I think Breath of the Wild leans a little bit more towards that than a Final Fantasy. But I love the World of Ruin. That's one of my favorite kind of things that happens in games is you lose in the middle of Final Fantasy VI.
And so definitively. It's like there's like no ways about it. It's like Kafka is a maniac. He is literally one of the greatest villains. His matey laugh, it's so like iconic now. It's like immediately, it's like I don't know how they did it. Something like he's just so cool. And then I even saw videos that Final Fantasy 14 even like added him in like one of their like content updates as a raid, and they even recreated both the sound and like the big statue that you fight at the end, which is like I showed it to my buddy Paul, and because he's an artist, he was like mesmerized at like just the power of like the pixel art of that entire boss fight that goes all the way to the top to the heaven and the transformed Kafka look. Is like I don't even know, like would you imagine if they would be able to do that in like a remake Kafka, and if they would get like a Mark Hamill, even though that would be like too on the nose. I mean,
it's kind of hard to imagine those older games with voices, right? I mean, like one of the things that really stood out when you first played like Final Fantasy X was hearing these people talk. Even in Final Fantasy VII, even though we moved to 3D graphics, you still didn't hear the voices. They're still in your head. And so that was a difference. It's hard to imagine Final Fantasy VI that way, but yeah, you need voice actors, I think. I've long thought that the Octopath Traveler 3D HD thing that they're doing is the way that a Final Fantasy VI remake should look.
I will love it.
But I haven't really thought about the voice acting, honestly. That would be a trick for Square Enix.
Yeah, because I'm like the only one that I know that does like a clown-ish like voice perfectly. It's obviously Mark Hamill's Joker, but obviously that would be like typecast. If someone would be like, oh, of course you got Mark Hamill, it's a typecast. But I can't think of anyone else other than like the assimilation Troy Baker did for Arkham Origins in that long forgotten Batman game that people like to pretend doesn't exist, even though it does. And who else could do like that kind of like clown maniac, and how you have to like make him like completely despicable. Like there was that scene early on when the scenario split in Final Fantasy VI, and you're following Sabine, and he meets Sion and Gao, the monkey character. That Kafka just straight up like murders an entire town, like poisoning, like then like through a siege, is like commits like a massive war crime. And even that to me, I was like, holy moly! I was like, they really went there, even killing the wife and I think it was son or daughter of Sion, and how those moments hit. I was actually struck. I was like, man, they really were slow. They try to thread a needle of how dark things could things could go with that story. Like even the beginning of the World of Ruin, when you wake up as Celius and you're with Sid, and depending on if you get the fast fish, which I learned this after the fact, I didn't know about the fast fish, that you could lose Sid because he gets sick, and then will you say she wanted to commit suicide, or she slipped? It's very interesting how they frame that mountain climb to that game, but it was like like mixing with the music, the things being said, kind of like this sort of flashback movie where she was hearing in Sid's voice of what the survivors of that island were doing and how they were losing hope. And then when she falls, I was like, wow, this game really went there. They really portrayed suicide, and that's nuts. Like for a 1994 game that wasn't even like, we didn't have M ratings at the time either. It was like, it wasn't even that bad. They were dealing with this kind of stuff, and even things like early childhood, right? Like early teenage pregnancy in like the World of Ruin with like the two teenagers that were like the only big people left after the entire town got decimated, where Terra was in. I was like, hats off to, who, I want to wonder, was it Katasi that wrote this game? Or I'm trying to think of like who was the one that wrote Final Fantasy VI, but man, they really went there with this one. And I was really struck by all of that. It just had like how cool some of the, almost all of the characters are. I really loved Shadow, the ninja. And where the first time you played, do you get all his backstory? That I heard that was like all hidden, or was that like after fact?
I don't think I got it the first time I played. It's kind of hard to separate, but I do remember staying at whatever inn that is and getting the dreams about Shadow and being super excited that there was story bits hidden in a specific inn you stayed in.
Yeah, it was so funny seeing like back in old school game design, like so many like rewarding things that were not in the main path basically and are all hidden. And also kind of like the brilliance of the World of Ruin, kind of how I like kind of see some Breath of the Wild inspiration, kind of like how at the end game it's like a tower in the middle. That's where Ganon is, and in World of Ruin, you know where Kefka is. And once you find Seltzer, the guy with the guy with the airship, you can basically go to the end. It's like the game just gives you the freedom to be like, if you think you're ready, go for it. Like you can go attack Kefka now, or find all the different places that we're not going to tell you unless you really pay attention, and putting the onus on you to try to find all your the rest of your squad. And that's how they complete the character arcs of all of them, from Locke, the thief, which was one of my favorite party members, finding Sabine, learning his final move. If you're able to find like the place of his master. I really love Sabine. Like I love his blitz attacks.
Absolutely.
Yes, and then some tiny things like getting absorbed by a worm if you go to like a specific place, and that's where you find one of the party members, or the Moogle, if you go back to the beginning, that then takes you to like the Jetty. I forget his name. It's like it's such a weird like amalgamation of stuff like that's all in that game, but it's just such power. When I told you I beat it twice, like I beat it in July and I beat it recently again because it's stuck in my mind, especially that soundtrack. Like Terra's, when I go on walks, I put Terra's theme. I love hearing there's just something whimsical and like very Fellowship of the Ring style, like we're going on a grand adventure of that overworld. And
because they put like the drums behind it, and it's really cool. I mean, that moment where they start the game and you're walking towards Narsh, was such a big moment in my young gamer life. That was so cool. The credits coming up across the mountains, and that was Terra's theme that they play there, and they played a number of other times in the game. And I love that soundtrack to death.
Yeah, like the remaster soundtrack. Even there's a track called "Protect the Espers," which plays when you're on the mountain and you split the party when Kefka's going in, and even also plays when you're escaping in the minecart, and when you're like at the airship heading into the floating continent. That they also added a little bit of Terra's theme in it in the remaster version that makes it so epic, because it's like if there's something that I really love about this game is like the undercurrent of the story is very dark, but the themes of hope are always like thrown. It's like an underlining through line. And even with some of the Star Wars references, you also hear in that from like obviously Wedge and Biggs at the beginning, which obviously is like recurrent motif, fighting against the Empire, against an evil emperor. Even the funny part, right, if you don't take your suit off when you're playing Locke's part, when you go open Celia's from her prison, she does the Leia joke of like, aren't you too short for to be a trooper and all that?
They love Star Wars in Final Fantasy Land.
Oh yes, and I feel they not only love Star Wars, but they understand the spirit of that original trilogy like more than I initially gave it credit for, and kind of like that undercurrent of hope that you really want to stop this evil stuff happening. That's in that Protect the Espers remastered song that I listen to it often because it's like it's like because there's something so quickly and then it just kicks in. I was like, yeah, it's like I'm feeling that. It's like Noble Mods. I'm gonna try to find a vinyl of that or a disc because I don't think he has put the remaster thing on Spotify. It's like it's so good. Other than the then the opera scene, which I agreed was incredible even when I experienced it. Do you have another like favorite moment from the game other than World of Ruin?
In Final Fantasy VI, I mean, I think the two big moments that stand out for me are the opera and the loss when Kefka gets his win and destroys the world, and then kind of, it's not one moment, but that realization that he did win, and then the start of Act 2 is really kind of slow, and you're figuring out what it is that you're supposed to do at all. I think that's just a big moment in gaming. I love all of Celeste and Locke's kind of relationship throughout the game. Yeah. And Terra, the last of the Espers, is kind of that mystical quality that you expect from a Final Fantasy, but I think the humans are even better. So I think Locke and Celeste are where kind of the emotion lives in the story. So Final Fantasy VI, I think, is the pinnacle of Final Fantasy so far, and a lot of the games that I like in the series, you can see chasing some of those aspects. So
yeah, it's a shadow music. Yeah, it's a shadow that they're pursuing.
And I think Final Fantasy 16 is successful primarily because those musical themes are just crazy.
Yes, even just in the overworld, like when you're going like in the Sambrique area and the Lost Woods, like it evokes a little bit of that kind of like old school melodic like exploration as you're going on your grand adventure. It's so fun. It's like, it made me appreciate 16 more, because imagine me playing 16, liking it more for its spectacle, me enjoying the combat and all that, but until I listened to y'all guys' spoiler cast for 16 that everyone can go listen to now over Elastin Media, and hearing so much, like Colin mentioned so many like inspiration that he saw from 4, from 6 and all that, and me being like, man, I think I want to see how, like, I didn't even, like, for example, the whole trying to build an airship in 16 sequence, like, it didn't really dawn on me that was like a play, like play on almost every moment in Final Fantasy if you're getting that airship, and how like it basically bamboozled you that you didn't end up getting an airship at the end. But it's so funny, it's like there's like so much trademark Final Fantasy in 16 that basically the only thing that was missing in that game was the systemic depth of like building the party, building like the different weapons that you can find, and making, especially in 6, like equipping your party with like the Espers so they can learn the magic and the summons. And I eventually, like, I cheated at the end and gave everyone Ultima. So everything I went through.
Not cheating. I was in grade school when I was really enjoying going and getting the experience eggs for everybody, and getting everybody Ultima so that you could just pound Kefka with Ultimas.
Oh yes,
he'd be gone in one turn.
Yeah, it was very satisfying having all my 14 party members just have Ultima in them and just like a massive explosion. And that's something that I ended up doing also with 7. Even though I only had one character do that with 7 with Red 13, at least when I played it, I was like, yeah, I guess I can only do it with 1 right now. So yeah, it's gotta be you, Red 13. So at least the game lets you do it. I would like to see people go through that. I'm gonna look videos of someone that goes through the ending section without Ultima, trying to fight behemoths, the big monsters. In Ultima Beast, it was funny seeing I am Ultima. I was like, huh. So I guess Ultima wasn't an original thing from 16 either. So how often often they reuse those motifs, and also laughing because I know Ultima wasn't your fun. You're not big on Ultima on 16.
No, I think that they tried to do both things, and they felt they had to be a little bit more Final Fantasy, and I don't think it worked out as strongly as it could have in Final Fantasy 16, but I still like the game.
Oh yeah, it's like that was a game, like, if just kind of switching just to that one, I was really taking like to heart like how good the brother relationship of that game really was, that even when like the entire story like takes its esoteric turn, like after the Bahamut fight, which, by the way, you have a mascot called Bahamut, right? I think I saw it on Twitter.
We have a bearded dragon called Bahamut now. Yes, we do. We unfortunately lost our prior bearded dragon this year. It's been a tough year. He was named Loki. And now, because my daughter was really enjoying watching Final Fantasy 16 with me, regardless of its language issues at some point during time, Bahamut is the name of our new pet, and he's a good bearded dragon.
Yeah, that's why I knew. I was like, yeah, of course. Like when you say the Final Fantasy is your favorite series, you see it there. You name him. You name your lizard.
That was my
there.
Daughter's choice. So
really? Huh. Yeah. Yes. Has your daughter played any of the older ones, or are you slowly gonna like introduce it to them?
She played Remake Final Fantasy VII Remake with me when it came out a couple of years ago. And then she wasn't going to play Final Fantasy 16 with me, but she came down to my gaming area one day while I was playing it, and she never left. She was like, "You got to play more Final Fantasy 16."
So. Yeah, it was a very, especially with the cinematic presentation of that game, that's better than even there's so many cinematic games that I can imagine she was just being mesmerized. Like, oh
yeah, it's very watchable, and she's big into music, and the music is great in that game. So we had a great time.
Oh yeah, that's really so cool. So it was like, so yeah, going back to that to 16 after the Bahamut fight, when the whole thing turns, and that's when you get this game's version of the World of Ruin, when everything gets like clouded, it's like darkness, and that's also supposedly the motif of the first game. Also, that even though you don't really see it, this is like, it's just darkness everywhere with like all these different monsters and all that. It's like it was really Clive and Joshua's relationship, especially Clive, with like how Ben Starr was so like the actor for Clive really sold the relationship, like like his frustration with his mother in that Bahamut fight, like him like venting off over her betrayal. Like, oh yeah, it's spoilers, people. By the way, yeah, we're gonna go full spoilers. Don't worry. It's the death of Joshua at the end when he gets Temple of Doom, like extract the last essence of Ultima, like when he's holding it back, and that beautiful shot of him getting the Phoenix down, basically. It was like
those scenes right before the final fight where you've got the big wings and he's holding them in his arms, and the music is playing, are some of my favorite in Final Fantasy history. Yeah, so they really nailed it in 16.
Yeah, and then they go for the cheap shot with the flashbacks, like at the end after all that fight, and then you see it. That hit me. I literally was like, I was not expecting to be crying at like 11 at night, the 2 days before I was gonna write that review. Like being like, there's this funny meme of Family Guy of Stu, like, I'm going to bed now, turning it off, and then he starts crying. That was me after that entire sequence, and it was like, yeah, it was like I was not expecting that game to like hit emotionally, even though I agree story is not perfect, especially because so many threads are dropped like halfway through, like the political machinations just recede to the side stuff that could be easily like lost and all of that, but it's like no longer the part of like the main story. But it's like I really feel that emotion really is like Final Fantasy's like calling card in most of the games I play. Even 15, a game that's super flawed. Going back to 15 is rough. After seeing 16, it's like how is a game that game's like barely hanging by a thread, technically, even in the newer machines. But the Brotherhood bond of 15 also, that hit at the end. The sacrifice of Noctis with Arden, which now I know is like, you can definitely feel that was them chasing the ghost of Kafka with Arden, but not as successfully, I would say with the storytelling skips of that game. It's kind of weird, but
yeah, I mean, I like 15. 15 has the unfortunate kind of existence of being almost great. You can see where it could have gone, and it just didn't quite get there.
Yeah, I call it kind of like the not great game that I love. It's like because that was the first one that I beat, because I dropped 13, and then when 15 launched, I was like, I gotta finish one of these. I'm gonna finish this one, and then that's when I beat that one before Remake. 7 Remake was my next one, but yeah, 15 is like, I appreciate some parts of it. I even feel that 15 at the very least gives some Final Fantasy elements that 16 didn't either. At least you had your party there. There's a little bit more customization and all of that. But it was kind of like how I said, like in my reviews, like either you pick a game that tries to do everything and not great, or you pick the one that focused on the two things that at least did well. That's why I kind of lean more towards 16, even though I much prefer 6, even as a newcomer. That became my favorite one. I mean, I beat it twice this year. That says a lot.
6 is great.
Yeah. And then with 7, obviously we got Rebirth coming in. I kind of want to just backtrack a little bit because sure. I know 7, especially with Remake, you were very high on that until, spoiler alert, it goes full Kingdom Hearts in its last 30 minutes. 3 years removed.
It kind of hinted that it was going to do that a little bit, so you already had your kind of warning flags up. But yeah, Final Fantasy 7, obviously coming off of Final Fantasy 6, is still one of my favorite games ever. It was played during my formative years, and I was very excited about it, and it hits all those musical and melodramatic beats that I love so much in the prior games in the series.
I played it for the first time this year also, by the way.
But Final Fantasy Remake, I mean, the big trick they pulled there is that it's not a remake of Final Fantasy VII.
It's a sequel.
It means the Final Fantasy VII world is being remade. And so Square Enix loves to do that kind of stuff. And by the time you get to the end of that game, which I thoroughly enjoyed, that's my favorite system of the modern Final Fantasies. I like it more than 16 even. It's a kind of action / turn-based system. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with it in Rebirth, because I loved what they did with it in their DLC with Yuffie.
Yuffie and Yuffie or Juffy. It depends on who it is. Like, I still have to play that DLC. I've kind of been waiting on replaying Remake as we get closer to Rear, because I'm gonna be reviewing that one also. But
it's definitely on my list of things to play this winter season, because I want to be ready for Rebirth. And I loved Remake, except that their big trick, as long as we're allowed to talk about spoilers, is that
full spoilers. Go for it.
It is at least apparently a sequel to the original Final Fantasy VII, where a time-traveling Sephiroth is changing things up. And what you do at the end of the Final Fantasy VII Remake is ostensibly kill Fate, the notion that you have to follow the plot line of Final Fantasy VII. And so nobody knows what's coming in Rebirth, other than the fact that we're pretty sure that they're not going to just toss everything everybody loves from that section of the game.
Yeah, based on the trailer. And just based on the trailer, we got to see Yunnan is there, the March, which it was so funny when I played it, because I played Final Fantasy VII Original this year because I was in the mood. I was like, I gotta play that original one. It's like I gotta do it now, because I need to understand the changes, or at least see like the at least get a, because that was what was interesting to me playing Remake, that the final part of like fighting Fate and fighting Sephiroth and all of that, it didn't quite register how controversial that was until more recently, until I finally played. I was like, now I understand why Hoeg was spicy.
My daughter was sitting next to me, and I'm like, none of this is in the game. And she's like, are you sure you didn't fight a giant Fate monster in Final Fantasy VII? And I'm like, yes, I'm very sure.
Man.
So no, that'll continue to be interesting, and I have to play the original with her as well. But I am super excited about Rebirth and what they've shown with kind of the open world mixed with this system that I love so much. And I'm hopeful it'll be great. I really don't have any doubts there. I think this is the best series Square Enix has put out in a long time.
Even with 16 being great. Yeah, that's what's so funny. It's like 16 is great, but but that's how good 7 Remake was. Even as someone that's how I saw that first chunk of that story initially. And now even playing the original one, because I have also my buddy Paul, he had always told me that he really liked the death of Shinra as president more in the original. And I didn't know what he meant until I saw it. Like, just that eerie moment of following the blood trail and seeing him stabbed with the big katana at the back. And even as someone that played that game for the first time, even in its chibi look and all that, I tell you, that story still holds up. There's a power to Final Fantasy VII, even musically. Like, how often did I hear? I mean, full spoilers: Aerith's death. The Darth Vader is Luke's father of gaming, basically. I've heard it so often. I never saw it. I was like, yeah, I heard it. I'm gonna see it. And even when that moment happened, I was like, I know that, and that moment still hits. Why? The music. Like when Aerith's theme plays, as soon as like the materia hits the floor, is like such a masterstroke. And how that song keeps playing as you're fighting the Genova monster that Sephiroth drops on you, because like it tells you the emotions, like you're fighting for the friend that you just lost, and it was engendering that emotion. I was like, that is their secret sauce. Umatsu is really the secret sauce of these games, and the power of their storytelling. Well,
what's funny about that, and you're right in describing Aerith's death that way, is that, you know, my daughter, who I said I was playing Remake with, doesn't know that.
Oh, she still doesn't know that. Hopefully she didn't hear it.
Of Aerith. Yeah. And it's funny to watch that game, right? Because they're talking about Fate and fighting it and all these various things. They'll put clips of Holy dropping to the floor like throughout that game with meaning for the player.
Yeah.
If you're knowledgeable about what happened, but like they completely go over my daughter's head.
Yeah. And she didn't ask you. And she was like, what's
no,
that?
She doesn't have any notion of that other than that it's a nice person.
Yeah. And I would say like Because I think you had said that you were not too big on the voice initially, right? By
I
Brim.
don't love Aerith's voice. That actually occurred to me while I was watching the Rebirth trailers. Like, that one sticks out at me as one that just doesn't match my feeling on Aerith. But I love all the voice work in the game except for that one.
Yeah, because it's funny when I played the original one, ignoring like the voice, like because she definitely has that Luna Lovegood kind of like more sweetness tone to her in the remake. But when you see her in the when you only see the text and you see kind of like the interactions, she feels a little bit more gangster. Like, I don't know, like
sassy. She's sassy.
She's definitely way sassier. And it was funny seeing that, because when I saw her in the remake, I was like, that's kind of what I sort of imagine Aerith to be, especially because I did play Kingdom Hearts, so they do have like a way of portraying her that I don't think it's quite the same as what it is in the game either. So that's what I do find fun, even though I feel like at least she plays the more sweetness side of that character really well. How do you feel like, especially now years removed, like with the entire cast, including like from Red 13, Barrett, Tifa, Cloud, like with the voice acting?
I've liked everybody so far. I think Barrett may overdo it a little bit sometimes. I like Cloud. Honestly, Cloud's one of those interesting ones where I think about it in my head as to how I read those words, and it's like I can't imagine anybody actually saying most of that stuff. And then they put it in remake, and it's like, yep, you've got that kind of brooding, edgy teenager thing that is kind of sincere, but also kind of annoyingly not. That I think actually is Cloud.
Yeah, and less. Cloud, and less of an asshole.
In this version, Cloud is still going through some mental trauma. So.
Yeah, and also like in the main game, he feels definitely more like a jerk in those early hours, and he's all about that money. And at least in the game, they keep that element, but the voice definitely mellows him out a little bit more. I feel that at least makes him more relatable initially, and I feel that works for him, just like in the comparison. But I really have you got to see clips of the Nibelheim flashback that they've been showing?
I've only seen the trailers, so if that's what you mean, I have seen those. And they're certainly hinting at playing with some of the stuff with Genova and clones and whatnot.
But I was just wondering if you got to see them or stuff, because I wouldn't like to spoil it, especially that in the Final Fantasy VII spoilers, kind of like the cool thing about the whole Nibelheim thing, it's how it's an unreliable narrator kind of storytelling, that the more like you really see what the truth is, it's like a really cool moment. And obviously, if you played Crisis Core, you know exactly what the truth is. By the way, because I remember I had tweeted at you like late last year if you were gonna play Reunion. Do you ever get to play Reunion?
I was starting to play Reunion when I had my unfortunate medical situation, and I haven't gone back yet.
Yeah, because that was my first time. I never played the PSP version, but for my buddy Paul, that's his favorite PSP game ever, and I had heard many great things about how that is like such a low-key favorite for like a very specific subsection of Final Fantasy. That, and me being an action guy, I was like, I would like definitely like. I got to review it there for SG. I gave it like a 7 because there's definitely some old stuff in that. There's some really rough.
I don't love that slot machine. I recall.
Yeah, they tweaked it a little bit more because from what I understand in the PSP version, and I had friends tell me because I needed to hear it from them just to know the difference as someone that was reviewing it, that the game was definitely way more relying on the slot machine, and the Rebirth and the remake at least gives you more control of some of the abilities that you want, and the slot machine just either gives you some buffs or that's how you get the summons. But before, like, you have to rely on a slot machine to do your magic sometimes, and maybe you don't have it ready for you. And now the new one, you can basically break the game with like Gravita, Jump, Fire. That's how I kind of started. Like, I went through that entire game. You could trivialize it. And the story, definitely weird with the Genesis and Geo and the Sephiroth origin. Obviously, all of them having like the one-winged angel thing. Is really interesting, like me learning more the history of Final Fantasy, how you can see when Tetsuya Nomura took more control over like the expanded universe of Final Fantasy VII. Because obviously he worked on the original, he made the character designs, but obviously he directed Advent Children, which I got to see this year. I got to see both versions by mistake because I tried to rent on the YouTube app the complete version, but they gave me the original cut. And I have a friend tell me, no, you don't want to watch that cut. You want to watch the actual complete cut because the first cut is nonsense. I was like, I do agree. I was like, that was edge lore. I was like, I could feel the edge in everything that I was watching. There was barely any story. I don't understand like what the point of things were. And the extra 30 minutes of the complete edition at least made it coherent. But it was like you can really tell that Kingdom Hearts really like seeped into so much of the expanded nature of Final Fantasy VII in good ways, in the spectacle, in bad ways by making it a little too exaggerated. At least in my opinion, like that fight with the apparently was. You saw the movie, right?
I did, but it was a while back, I have to admit.
Okay, yeah. Do you remember a big scene where the entire team fights like a Bahamut that shows up like in the middle of the scene? That's like everyone tag teaming and like fighting in the sky and things like that. So
I remember a lot of sky fighting.
Yeah. So I was like, when I played me having just played 7, it's like it's weird seeing like the more grounded nature of like the main story of the release and how just outrageous it gets, especially with the big Cloud and Sephiroth fight, which is really cool visually, and you see it. They basically aped a lot of that fight in the remake, from the visuals, like the camera angles and some of like the interactions with the team as you're fighting. It's totally out of that game, but I do wonder, especially with Rebirth, Nomura is technically not super involved in that game, like for myself, because he's working on Kingdom Hearts 4. God bless him. But I wonder if we're gonna get too much weirdness with him not being like super involved. And I know a lot of people argued that the weird stuff is not to him, that's more like the writer that works with him. But I'm like, yes and no. Yeah, maybe someone's writing, but who's enabling it? That's always how I see it. Like, who's the arbiter?
Well, and these games and these worlds live in different people's minds in different ways. So I tend to like the vibe that I ascribe to Final Fantasy VII, which is kind of an apocalyptic environmental tale about corporations and meteors and light and dark and things like that, and not so much flying sword battles. But I think there is reason to be concerned because even the Yuffie DLC that I liked starts to get into like the Genesis type of stuff.
Ooh.
And so I think they're going to bring in all the Final Fantasy VII lore from all the various places into this series. Yeah. And I don't know that I love that, but I'm willing to go along for the ride because I like this system a lot. And I think there is a lot of talent going towards making it a good game. And so I'm willing to be there. I just wish they hadn't switched the remake notion, because it was something that so many of us were looking forward to, a full fidelity remake of Final Fantasy VII. And remake the game that we got is so much that for so long that it does feel like the rug was pulled out from under you a little bit.
And also interesting because have you been keeping up on Ever Crisis, the recent mobile game that's basically that? Like, it feels like what everyone wanted became that mobile game, and it's trapped in a gacha game. It's really
I think I read that in like a Eurogamer review, but I have not tried it yet. I don't play on my phone very much.
Yeah, I got to try it a little bit just to kind of see, because I was in that big Final Fantasy kick, and having I just played the original and trying that, I'm like, man, this is like, if you remove the gacha stuff, this is what you wanted. This is like what so many people wanted, because it's like during the fights, kind of like in the original, different character models and all that, and the chibis as you're like exploring, how well that works like with like a different coat of paint. And me thinking, man, if Square is smart, they would then release this on console, like maybe as a paid product, not as free to play, remove the gacha stuff, maybe leave it in the mobile, because it is that, like how they did the turn-based combat thing, where you know how like in remake you can like enable the automatic the character's attack as you're building the AP, and then you pick the stray. They did that in the mobile game, and I'm like, this is so disheartening. This is so distressing. This is the game people wanted, and it's stuck there. And you're always being reminded, it's like, buy a new outfit here, or here's your material that you can like give us some money, and you can like keep upgrading. And it's like so designed that eventually you're gonna hit a wall that it will require you to log in every day to at least build up your currency that they give you to like keep on going. And it's really super frustrating, because it's like, man, it's like part of them knew and they did this. It sucks. But 7, but just like for people that still have not played 7, I haven't played it in 2023, definitely they have to get over the edgy, like the character models, at least in overworld, really look rough, especially when you're going through the world. That's the one thing when I see Rebirth and kind of connected me, like, wow, the Chocobo farm, that one of those, like, or Karn, the place where you go and like seeing how they like seamlessly has made us, like there's so much love, like you see the money on the screen. but the story still holds up so strong. Kind of like I mentioned with Aretha. And also a thing that really struck me when I played bad use of words, sorry. Sorry about that. Like,
oh, no, it's fine.
Yeah. How often do you get people like that you use that word and be like, oh, sorry, this is too early for that? Like,
oh no, it's not too early. My brother makes jokes about strokes now again. So
okay.
Hey, yeah, we're all good.
I just want to be respected. Yeah, just gotta be. I like being respectful, but yeah. So like, it really struck me how much so many story elements still hit, and even tiny moments like Sid going like Sid's theme in that game, especially when you're like in the rocket and he's thinking about the sacrifice, or you're trying to get like the materia from out of it. And I was hearing it play. Players like, this feels very patriotic and very inspiring. And even like the amazing moment where they parachute in at the end, like at the end when they go back to Midgar, and the theme is playing. I'm like, again, Umatsu is like, it's like, even when you least expect it, he always hits you with like those hummable, like powerful moments that really stick and associate both the game and its characters and story moments always. And not many games do that. Even like some of my favorite cinematic games, like I like Uncharted, like especially the original trilogy. 4, I'm like, I like it. It's a end cap when I do a replay, but I rarely replay it. But I don't think of like moments when I'm humming music of that game and associating like an emotional moment or a particular story beat. And that's kind of like the power of Final Fantasy, and that's how they transcend and become like this super memorable thing. And that was another moment for me. That Sid theme. What were some of your favorite moments from 7? I would assume the Aerith part, the Aerith death is a big one. Like to you for 7, what is like other big moments for you that you remember?
Well, I mean, I think the opening is very strong. The Mako Reactor demo, I think I probably played 50 times. So I was very excited about the scene immediately after the demo. Because I had played it so many times. When you got the game, you're in the broken wall and you're heading up to Midgard. And I think Final Fantasy VII, I remembered the date in the Golden Saucer being a big deal, and the notion that things were accelerating in the second act of the game with the meteor and the weapons. I remember the big guns on Midgar failing, and the weapons coming out was just a big moment where you're like, oh, this is really escalated. Things have gotten bad. And I love it when that happens. I love it when the Final Fantasy games get out of control. And they so often do. Well, with that music, I mean, the things that I really love about Final Fantasy VII are the music probably first. I love the overworld theme of that game in particular. And Aerith's theme is right from the start, where you have the and the pullback, right? Like, I think everybody thinks of the pullback to show Midgar from the street. And if you go and you play the original Final Fantasy VII, you see how long they're just on like the live stream dots in the air. Like it's just dots on blackness for minutes before they even show Aerith. So those are the things I think of primarily with Final Fantasy VII. I prefer 6. I think 7's story gets a little muddled in the middle, but 7 is still a super strong game.
Yeah, I would put like 7 as like a number 2 if I were ranking them. Even maybe behind 4. Like I always debate between those two. I think I like
4 better than 7 as well, but I like all 3 of those games.
Yeah, I feel those 3 are the pinnacles, and they still hold strong. And then Taze depends on like the rest ones. The weapon fight at the place where Cloud is like in his coma, or like he's like going crazy, and he goes. That fight was tough, because that was also the part where I actually started loving the game more, where you finally stop playing as Cloud and kind of like the party kind of like takes center stage for a little bit. Because that's the thing that I loved about 6, feeling like it was not just one main character, but it's kind of like everyone feels like has equal power. And in that case, they let you play as Tifa, Barrett, and then Sid kind of takes control for a little bit.
I guess the Cloud's not Cloud stuff in 7 also hit pretty big when I was younger.
Yeah, and the flashbacks to figuring everything out in the mind, that was also really cool. Like when you're like going into the live stream with Tifa, I really want to see if they when they do that, and either if it's going to be Rebirth or whatever the third part is. If they're saying that they're going to be switching things around, I really want to see how they do that. the final fight against Genova and Sephiroth, that Genova fight was tough. Even now, like as you're going down to the live stream, the Sephiroth fight, obviously like him becoming like the big monster that then ends with that one-on-one fight and that like black
Angel.
thing.
That's the song we have for the rest of our lives there.
Yeah, it's such an iconic. Yeah, it's such an iconic thing that immediately when Sephiroth was revealed for Smash, it just the first piece plays was like that's Sephiroth. That dun 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 dun. It is like so iconic. Then just to like conclude our Final Fantasy like talk, Rick, especially since I have stopped at 7. I was planning on doing all of 8, then 9, then 10, then 12. I had them installed, thankfully, thanks to PS Extra. From those upcoming ones that I have from like 8 to 12, which one's your favorite from those, and which one's your least favorite, and why? At least for me, like as a recommendation to someone that is still playing. I've started 8. I got some opinions early on for that one.
I was gonna say it's pretty hard to say because I actually really love 8, but 8 is kind of fundamentally different / flawed depending on how you want to approach it in a number of ways. And 8 is also chasing 7 a little bit, so you get some of Squall being Cloud, if you couldn't tell just from the names.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think 8's probably my favorite out of those. I think if you asked everybody in the Final Fantasy community, they'd tell you 9. Maybe 10. 10 I've never been as big a fan of as other people.
It's from what I understand, I feel 10 is there's like two camps of like when you grow up and when you start at Final Fantasy, and I feel like 7 and 10 kind of hated that moment. It's kind of like maybe because they were the first of their console, and that's why a lot of people, I know that I have some friends that when people tell me, it's like when you hear that 7 is someone's favorite, it's because that's the first one they played. I'm like, okay, that's what I say. Or even when they say with 10, and I wonder if that's like the correlation or not, but at least for you,
I think there is some of that. I think 10 doesn't follow from 7, 8, 9 as well.
They changed the combat.
They changed the combat. They certainly changed the look, right? It's on a different generation of consoles, but they also changed the approach of how they make it. So it's a little bit more map dot picking and a little bit less of what you were seeing in those 7, 8, and 9 entries. So I would, if I were recommending, I'd probably go with 8. But I think the three choices there are 8, 10, and 12 are all kind of different games. Yeah.
Which is the calling card for the series. Even going back to the other ones, just even tiny things, how little they change or how much. And that's kind of what makes them special. It's a very ever evolving series.
And 12, I mean, if you like Star Wars, 12 might wear the Star Wars fandom on its sleeve the most.
Ooh, and I like that.
There's just plot points that are straight up. Here's Han Solo in the Millennium Falcon.
Yes. But no Last Jedi, right?
No, not Last Jedi. This is well before Disney owned Star Wars. So it's all those Star Wars motifs. There's again a kingdom and an empire and a princess. And there's a pilot with a fun co-pilot friend and that kind of thing. So it really did feel like Star Wars when I first played it. And I think since the current versions, if you're playing it on a modern system, are the Zodiac versions, the middle of the game kind of petered out when it originally released. And I don't know the history there, but it wasn't a strong middle. It had a lot of red herrings and a lot of long dungeons to get to.
I know there's like a behind the scenes story that there was like 2 directors that kind of like worked on that game, and someone left halfway through and someone took over, and instead of rebooting just kept building from there. Do you think that's kind of, do you feel it there? Do you feel that's where the behind the scenes struggle kind of starts seeping outside the seams?
If that's what happened, it would make sense, because certainly I was deeply invested in 12 when I first played it, and then you just get to this point where you're just doing dungeon after dungeon, and they're telling you the next story bit is in the next dungeon like 3 times in a row.
Like if it's freaking Princess Speech. Like a Princess Speech.
And I only ever got past that portion of the game when the remakes came out.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I assume did they also add quality of life, like faster battles or things like that, kind of like we see now?
I think the new ones have a bunch of those buttons. I think the most important thing is that they let you change your skill tree for the characters, and you weren't allowed to do that before. So you get a lot more variability as to what you can build.
That makes sense. Yeah. Next year is looking, not compared to this year, like a stacked with games, at least so far. It feels like that would be like a perfect time, especially after I'm done with Rebirth, to kind of like repick the kind of like my Final Fantasy journey, because I even kind of want to see a lot of 14, especially after 16. So much of that game was in 16. Same director, obviously, and same and the same composer.
You'll see immediately that 16 is a version of 14.
Yeah,
it's single player.
Yeah, I got to do the free trial just to kind of start it, and then I had such a funny story. I'm gonna try to do this real quick before I let you go. So I was enjoying it so much that then I saw the expansions were on sale, like especially for Endwalker, and they said like, yeah, for $30 you get the digital edition, deluxe edition for Endwalker, and it comes with all the expansions. I was like, heck yeah! I was like enjoying a little bit of what I got from the free trial. I'm gonna buy that. Then I went to play the Pixel remasters because I just bought it. I'm going to play that. And then my friend Paul, he decided to do 14. I was like, I kind of want to play with him. And I log in and they was like, you don't have a license. I'm like, why don't I have a license? I bought the game. Then I realized.
Yeah, you do have to pay.
Yeah, as soon as you buy, you forfeit the entirety of the free trial. And because I'm in El Salvador, for a while, my cards were not working. I was going into the Moogle station to try to get the crystals, to try to buy like the month, and I felt like a clown, like in my computer. Like I was like, I was like, I bought this game. I hate that I'm not going to be able to play, but this system doesn't work. I had to talk to customer support for them to like authorize my cards, for them to allow me to buy. I was like, let me play your game. I want to play your game, and that's when I got to test through I was able to do it through PayPal at least, and that's why I was able to like at least buy a month, and at least I played halfway through the Realm Reborn thing before I had to review other stuff. And I was like, man, and now I tell people, if you're interested, if you see the sale, don't. It looks tempting. It's a nice deal, especially me coming from the Destiny that we have got a nickel and dime so hard over every expansion, and seeing them like giving you so much, especially in the free trial, that now they added you another expansion. I'm like, yeah, just wait it out. It's like play everything they give you for free, because then you're not gonna have to dedicate your time. Because now I feel I screw myself now with that, because now if I really want to play 14, I'm gonna have to pay the month, and I will have to like get my money's worth out of that, and that kind of sucks, because then my buddy Paul, he hasn't paid anything, and he's like, yeah, I have all this free time to do that. I feel like Squidward looking at Sponge Patrick from my blinds. You'd be like, nah, why did I get so the impulse? They got me in the impulse vibe, those jerks. So
it's a good
game. Rick, yeah, no, I really enjoy it, especially everyone swears by the expansion. How much of 14 do you play? Like,
I've never been able to beat a Realm Reborn.
Oh, okay.
So
and you like
things about all of the expansions, and I haven't gotten there, but I do like the game. I just wind up getting distracted by the job system and just deciding to mine for 10 hours or whatever.
Yeah, you know. It can be very mindless. It was like me. It hit at a perfect time where I was not playing Destiny. I'm one of those unfortunate souls that can be very addictive to that game. So at that point where that game, obviously you probably heard that this is not a great year for Destiny in the Lightfall era.
I have heard that.
Yeah. Poor Travis, Travis was right. One of the few times that it was like the only one. I always give him credit, because I even reviewed Lightfall for Season Gaming. It was like he was the only one that came in negative. Like he was like, I got a bad feeling about this, and everyone was like, nah, you're a hater. It's like, look how cool the purples and the strand thing have. And now everyone was like, no, he was right. He absolutely was right with how this year has gone.
Don't get me wrong, he is a hater. He's just right in that.
Yeah, eventually in your hate, you get right. Like for example, I told him, like when I had him on last week, I told him that I ranked all the Assassin's Creed games for Season Gaming. I beat Mirage. Do you finish Mirage, by the way?
I have not finished Mirage. Okay. I've gotten waylaid by Diablo 4 Season 2.
Yeah, which I had heard that they had delayed the season by just for a few hours, right? The season's up, right? Season 2?
The season is up. They got delayed for 3 hours, and crossplay is down. So whatever technical issue they have, there's no crossplay.
Yeah,
I think crossplay with PC. I think the consoles may still be able to talk to each other. I don't know.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was playing on PlayStation. You're playing on Xbox, right?
I am. I love Diablo 4. Some people don't. I know this. I get that from my tweets.
Yeah.
But I love Diablo 4, and I think this season is even stronger than Season 1.
Yeah. I enjoyed Diablo, like at least just base game, and then the seasonal model of like restarting a new character and all, it didn't quite sit well with me. And I know that's how Diablo 3 was, but I was like, man, it's like I put all this time into my character. It sucks that then I would have to start a new one. Maybe eventually I'll get into that mindset. I'll eventually get there. So I'm letting
I like bouncing around the different classes.
Yeah.
You know, so I find fun in that.
Yeah, it makes sense. And also I'm playing other stuff, so that kind of makes it harder to like really like dedicate. But Diablo 4 was really good. But I really like Mirage, and I kind of told Travis my rankings, and he laughed that I put Syndicate so high.
I like Syndicate a lot.
Yeah, and what's so funny is that everywhere, like if you go and look at many rankings, it's like it's also high up there. And Trey was like, he thought he was like the majority opinion of that one, and I was like, I sent him a screenshots of. I was not that far off. I put it as my number 3, my third favorite. I got it like as a
might be my second favorite.
Yeah,
Odyssey is my favorite, but it's the RPG side of things.
Yeah.
And Syndicate is my favorite on the kind of original recipe side of things.
Yeah, if for that console generation, that's the best one. Like for people that still like the old style non-RPG ones, that was definitely the best one. To me, I'm the 2 and Brotherhood guy. That I just love those games so much. But I understand why someone would put Odyssey as number 1 because it's the most fun. That's objectively the most fun out of all of them.
I adore Odyssey.
Yeah,
that was my game of the year.
Yeah, I remember. It's like, that was again one of the first times I saw it because you were doing the virtual legality. Like you did like give a game every. You gave it like a special day, and then I saw you gave out it.
I did it the 10 days before Christmas. I did 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and Odyssey was my number 1. And yeah, I took some heat for that, but I love Odyssey.
I took heat by saying that I liked it more than Red Dead 2 at the time, and I still stand by that. So
I think Red Dead 2 was my number 10.
Yeah, and God of War 2018, which was my number 1, I think was your number 8.
It was my number 8. That's true.
Yeah, so I'm very. I had that in mind. Kind of like I love like the statistical like memory of things. So hopefully it's not too weird that I know that I know that. So yeah, it's a he made fun that I put Syndicate that high, but also because he said that he reminds him of Ains' favorite show, Peaky Blinders. and I told Ains that, and Ains was gonna roast Travis, and he didn't show up at last Sunday. I was like, dang it. I even reminded Ains like, hey, don't forget to talk about Peaky Blinders. And he was even putting in the chat, it's like, hey, Peaky Blinders. I wanted to you hear say something about that. So yeah, but yeah, I like Mirage a lot. So yeah, I put my rankings there out in season. Yeah, I think it's like middle of the road for me. I like it more than Valhalla, but I like Origins, Odyssey, Syndicate, Black Flag 2, and Brotherhood better. But it's good playing an Assassin's Creed game that's digestible, like you can finish. And I did finish Valhalla after 151 hours. So
I can't believe anybody ever beat Valhalla. So yeah. Good for you.
Yeah, it's like insane. It also had my tilt with Valhalla. Like I'm such a sucker for both Norse stuff and the first civilization thing. And I know many people aren't. They're more into the historical recreation of things. And with that one, like, because I was such a big sucker for that in the early game, seeing them bring that back and tie Norse mythology into their weird lore was like really cool. And that kept me going, even though that game is so repetitive. Like, go conquest here's talk to the whatever random king here is, to then go do the Viking invasion and rinse and repeat with broken stealth, because it was hard to be stealthy in that game compared to Mirage. Mirage is a much better stealth game, so I really enjoy that. And then obviously we got Spider-Man so soon, so I can't wait to hear your thoughts on Bitcast whenever you get to play it. And because I know
I'm looking forward to Spider-Man a lot. I love Spider-Man 2018, and even though I said that was my third favorite game of that year, I find myself going back to it more than any of other game from 2018. I love the Spider-Man, so 2 is gonna be great.
Yeah, I recently replayed remastered just to kind of like warm up, and also replay Miles Morales. I personally like Miles Morales slightly more because it's so much tighter. 2018 is really great. The story is still really great. It's just it gets in its own way so often that, especially if you use mainline, if you're not playing it more naturally like I did originally, I'm gonna go collect this backpack, do this side quest. Like playing a Spider-Man, doing an MJ section and there back and forth. It's like it's what I imagine when I replay Ragnarok. I'm gonna feel that same way when it was like having to go from Kratos into Atreus. I feel that 2018 kind of has that problem. At least it's short, so it's like at least quicker. Ragnarok is obviously much longer. So I'm really excited for Spider-Man, even though this year I had massive MCU burnout. Like I was so sick of Marvel stuff that it's until I recently replayed Miles Morales, I was like, no, I think I'm excited for this again, because let's face it, MCU has been really bad recently, right? It has not been strong. Yeah,
but no, I think you're exactly right. I think Miles Morales I like a little bit more than 2018 because it is tighter. Yeah, it is a more focused narrative, and it's a good one.
Yeah, and the side stuff so much improved, and that gives that game its heart. Like I feel when you finish everything, how that is so tied to Miles honoring his deceased father to and what he meant to the community. That hit. I was like, man, this game's like really this is, at least in the Sony side, this is where we're getting the heart in their stories, because right now, like, I kind of really do agree with you, because I'm a big I like their exclusives a lot, but you were the first one that was like really ringing the bell of like they were getting too mired in mystery and apocalypses and all that. And Spider-Man is like the one few on that it's not quite there, even though it can be dark at times. And how much I need that in my life, especially post Last of Us 2. So, which I know that was one of the big ones. Like you made a big, that post-mortem I really like that was like very, I like the game, but it was a really interesting perspective hearing it, that like hearing your thoughts on that game that way, especially in the Elite, in that episode you did with Alita, or at Legal Bites with Colin, who he absolutely loves that game. So to each their own. So
he loves it. Alita loves it. Yeah, no, it's interesting. Last of Us Part 2 is one of those where I think a number of people don't like it for reasons that maybe aren't exciting, but I think it has got real problems with narrative flow and pacing and what it actually wants to tell as a story. And I mean, one of the things that keeps striking me is that I don't know that Naughty Dog, as it currently consists, actually understands the story that they put out in Last of Us Part 1. So that creates a really weird kind of situation with 2 and whatever they do after.
Yeah, and just the fact that they're still stuck on that is just so, because I really used to love Naughty Dog. Like they were definitely my favorite from that stable of studio, and Insomniac I think is their MVP currently. Like just on output alone, just like they're carrying that entire console on their own shoulders. Like even with Ragnarok receiving all the praise last year, is like I feel Insomniac is like a more important studio for like at least one that you see more celebrated by the fan base. There's not as contentious. Obviously, Naughty Dog, with my buddy Paul, we always joke that they love the smell of their own farts, and especially they have become very pretentious under Neil Druckmann, which is kind of it's not what I love them for. Especially loving the Jack games, even the early Uncharted and all that. I love the idea of The Last of Us kind of as their counter programming. It sucks that it feels like that's now deprogramming for them. And
I think that's right. Yeah, I love Jack and Daxter. I like Naughty Dog going back to the 3DO, Crash Bandicoot, and Uncharted 2, I think, is one of the pinnacle games of that generation, especially.
My number 4 favorite game ever.
But The Last of Us Part 1, I really enjoyed. Last of Us Part 2 lost me, even though I think, as I said in that review, I really think the technical artistry of that game is super impressive.
Yeah.
But the writing was not.
Yeah, it's kind of like a good academic product, I would say, for like developers to see like what could be the peak of production value, and even I would dare say acting and some of the emotions that it elicits. But yeah, that story is like so messy, so Westworld incoherent, which we know the writer. It makes sense when they got a writer like that from Westworld, why it had to jump around so much. So I just want them to do something new. Like I would accept the third game like very late, if like let's say if eventually they do show, because you're like, no, we have something new. Like back in the day we had 2 stuff, we can do that. Then I could be like, okay, show me at the very least, show me that you're not just that, like you just don't want to be mired in the present stuff. That's kind of something that for Santa Monica, even now that they're done with God of War, we know Cory Barlog didn't work on this last God of War game other than as a creative overseer, because he was working on other stuff that we probably hear is a space game. I would love a space game from Sony, like at least because it would be something different. Yeah,
I miss Colony Wars. I've said that name before. When Sony bought Psygnosis, which was one of the real big favorites in the 90s, that was a cool thing that was on the PlayStation. They had G Police and Colony Wars and all sorts of stuff. That's been missing from the Sony block for a while now. Yeah,
even back then the PS3 era when I got Resistance and Killzone, at the very least they had that. Even Warhawk and Starhawk was there. It was a nice buffet of different things that maybe had something in common but felt different. And now everything feels is the same style with slight variations. Because I know a lot of people like to say that it's not as that things are not as homogeneous as they seem, but they really are when you look at it like fundamentally. So I definitely want more stuff from them, especially now that let's hope with now that Activision is under Microsoft, that a lot of that IP, like as Phil Spencer said in that interview this week earlier, that they want to see like what they have on the vault and as teams that they want to bring back. I hope that we see more the creative side of Activision even emerge, and then that will push everyone to be like, so to be like, hey, we cannot just be the one thing now. It's like, look at all that variety, especially if it starts hitting.
I would love that.
Especially you had a brother that worked
for variety all the time.
Yeah, and you had a brother that worked for Activision also, right? Like for a brief time.
So my brother's path is actually really interesting. He worked for Insomniac, and he worked on A Rift in Time. And then he worked for a mobile developer for a while. He eventually found himself at High Moon Studios, and they became a support studio for Call of Duty under the Activision banner. And then he left to go work at ZeniMax Online under the Bethesda umbrella. They're most known for making Elder Scrolls Online right now. They're working on something else that's super secret that he won't share with me because he's very legal.
Yeah.
But
NDAs and stuff.
Yeah, he won't share it with me at all. Yeah. But he's working there. And then, of course, with Microsoft buying Activision Blizzard, all of his old friends have come back into the family.
Yeah.
So who knows what his future is.
Yeah, so he's basically a joker. I used to work as them. Like I went to bed working for someone and woke up like working for someone else, like often almost.
Yeah, he just left early. That's his only difference. They all work for Microsoft now. He just left a year before them.
Yeah. So when you mentioned High Moon real quick, like he didn't work at all in the Transformers games, right? He
wasn't there at that time.
Yeah. Did he work on the Destiny stuff?
Do you know? He did work on the Destiny stuff. Okay. So High Moon, and I don't know how public they were with much of this, but High Moon was the support studio for the Forsaken expansion.
Yeah.
So he helped work on
the campaign,
creating the new enemy class for Forsaken. So he helped design that.
That's so cool, man. That's so cool that you know someone like, especially the last big edition for that game, like on a very fundamental level, that came from High Moon, and that he was there. That's really cool that you had someone in the inside that you can learn. Like, I bet that has helped you a lot, kind of like understand a lot of the machinations of game development through him. To like,
I get to see a lot of the experience, right? Like, what does it look like day to day, and how long does it take one of these things to get made, etc.
Yeah,
that's so cool. Details with me because he will not violate his NDA, Activision or Microsoft, no matter how much I ask him.
I know, yeah, man. That's good for them because it's always good to know that they can trust people, that they have them on like on the hidden stuff to avoid legal stuff. Then they would have to bring you in as a lawyer, even though that's not your expertise. So, Hoeg, I want to thank you so much. I don't want to take too much time, like because I know like it's so fun talking with you. It's so fun talking with you, and I know that if there's a scale, we can go forever, and I don't want to keep holding you, but definitely can't wait to eventually like bring you in for like other more game specific talk. Maybe by the time of Rebirth, that would be fun if I could get you in like sometime sometime in the early year next year, whenever that happens, and your schedule allowing, if you're not too busy and other stuff. So where can people find you, fine sir?
Sure. So, I mean, we talked about it a little bit. Mostly I'm on YouTube. So if you go check out the HoegLaw YouTube channel, that's HoEG Law. I've got Virtual Legality, where we talk about the law and business of pop culture and video games. We've got Hangouts and Headlines, where we talk about news items that have been in the stories of the day and how they're being interpreted through the media. And then we also have Lawyers and Dragons, which is lawyers playing Dungeons and Dragons. So if any of that sounds fun to you, come check it out on the channel. We've got a lot of people. I think we're at 118,000 subscribers, and we have a lot of fun there. And hopefully it's educational at the same time. I'm also on Twitter under the same name at HoegLaw, or X, depending on what you're calling it.
I'll keep calling it Twitter X, and just because you're not gonna stop me with the terminology, Elon Musk. You won't.
And I am, of course, on the Seasoned Gaming Bitcast every Sunday morning, and random appearances at Last Time Media, sometimes for the spoiler cuts, 2 recent ones over there at Alan Wake, that they did it with both Colin and Dagan Moriarty, and also the Final Fantasy 16 one that just went public today. If you want to go listen to Hoeg's thoughts on that one, it's we call that game a flawed gem. So I did call it a flawed gem.
Yeah,
it really is a gem, but there are some things I would tweak.
Yeah, and then you can find me at _Dro Segovia on both Twitter X. You can find me at Threads/Instagram at Alejandro Segovia 93. You can find me always at this podcast that we post every Fridays. We usually post from 2 p.m. onward. Your episode is going to be a Saturday extra episode. So that's when it's going live. And then you can find my reviews at seasonedgaming.com and some of my old written content on my own website, thecriticalcorner.com, which I may do a review for Spider-Man 2 there because someone else is doing it for Seasoned Gaming. But my first review on my site was Spider-Man 1, so I feel like I need to close the loop nice. on that one. So, Hoeg, thank you so much. I want to thank also big thank you for your wife and probably later giving you permission to be able to do that, because I know she's been like she really has been like Zach carrying Cloud in Crisis Core. She's been that for you all this time.
Absolutely.
And and your story, and your story very inspiring. I love seeing your recovery. Like just talking with you, we wouldn't know that happened to you on Sunday. That's like such a great miracle and such a great inspiration for someone like anyone else that may go through that. So until the next time, Hoeg, I can't wait to hear more of your videos and your big cast appearances, hear more of your hot takes. We're gonna see many of those, but I tell you people, they are fun. Poor Travis. We talked about that in his episode last time. And everyone else, enjoy the rest of the games happening. Thank you for listening to this episode. You can leave a like and subscribe if you like what you listened. And I'll see you until next time. Peace out.